Oh, good afternoon to everybody, and it's so nice to see such a full house still. So we've been enjoying the occasion, and we hope that you remain still for 1 hour, a bit more. As Professor Mary said in the beginning of this session, this is very much a learning occasion. And in fact, when we were planning this whole conference with Nat O'Connor and the Nordic ambassadors in Dublin, the whole conference was planned as a educative training information exchange session on a very reciprocal basis, and we hope to go on within the same line until the very end. In Finland there is a saying that the best way learning is to learn from your own mistakes. I don't agree with this. A better way to learn is to learn from someone else's mistakes. And I think that is also one more reason to be here. And I'm returning to my previous incarnation related to OECD, because in my opinion OECD is one of the rare real learning organizations, learning international organizations in the world. I hope more will be coming, including European Union. Anyhow, in OECD during my time we organized a very similar session in May 2008 on Nordic experiences or Nordic models, and I will be saying a few things about that. But before that, 2008, maybe we were in a situation where we didn't know anything about, nothing about the Lehman Brothers. That was to come in October, and the Irish decision for blank guarantees to the banking sector. What we knew was the developments that had been taking place in OECD in terms of economic modeling. All through the 90s in OECD, the neoliberal low-tax Anglo-Saxon model was one that was very prevalent, and there was very little space for anything else. After the change of the millennium, there was a change also in this, and Nordic model and related aspects started getting more attention, and we organized this seminar for the reason to have even more attention to the other alternative, which is a Nordic model or Nordic models and all the differences they provide. So that was behind. And the major observations we had in that seminar was firstly that there is no Nordic model. There are several different approaches, like you have said today so correctly. The second conclusion was that but what the Nordic countries have is the same values, as also said today. This said with a reminder that Ireland and many other countries in the European Union and elsewhere are sharing these values, or at least part of these values. So these values we have mentioned here and advertised are not in that way only Nordic values. They are values that have been adopted in many places and should be adopted more, as we think in the Nordic countries. The third conclusion in Paris was that there is no way of transplanting experiences as such. They are tied to specificities of each environment. But at the same time we said that there is a lot of space for lessons that can be drawn and shared, and that's what we are again doing today. So this goes very much in line what we were discussing also in Paris, but I have to say that the quality of discussion is better. Then some words about the changing times and changing models. A lot of things have happened, and naturally crises are also excellent times for learning and making changes, and we know that the European Union is stronger in crisis than during the peace times. Even this recent crisis should be read as a competition between different political and economic models, but still there may be one overarching observation from the present and recent crisis in the Nordic countries, and this is also a lesson learned in my opinion. A kind of blind and naive belief on the omnipotent and self-correcting market forces is very much weakened now, and the state is back to the stage. Some of you may recall when Commissioner Rehn was here 1 year ago and speaking at IIEA. His message was very clear at that time. He said to the Irish that you can partly blame yourselves, but partly all the European Union, EMU, including the Commission. All these have to take a responsibility. He went on saying that the European Stability Pact was too much of a child of good times. What was fatally neglected, according to him, was exactly the role of the state. Firstly, in follow-up and surveillance, secondly, in guidance and proper regulation, and thirdly, the fiscal role of the state. These rules in the Stability Pact were relatively well in place, but what was really lacking was how to implement them and the bodies and systems for effective implementation. At the same time as this has been taking place, there has been a certain convergence also between the economic policy models. Firstly, as I said, the state is back in regulation and fiscal policy especially. This is also in reflection of what happened in the Nordic countries in the early 90s. Secondly, not only the state, but stronger international coordination, stronger international organizations, and new international communities like G20 are now relatively successfully dealing with the same issues. So, thirdly, goodbye for economic sovereignty. We have a hugely increased interdependence, and I think in economic life, if we want to proceed, we shouldn't be crying too much for the lost sovereignty in these terms. We are interdependent, and we need cooperation, coordination, and learning from each other. Also, second thing has happened in convergence. Taxation in the Nordic countries concerning our model has been decreasing during the last 10-15 years. Finland is a good example of that, as you saw in the curves and statistics. And this has happened overall. Denmark is still a leader in taxation, but I understand that also in case of Denmark the trend has been lower. Resilience. What has happened? How do we manage with the crisis? What is the learning process over there? I would say that very strong. If we are looking on the toolbox created for the management of financial crisis, we can easily find out that there have been very similar things followed up by Ireland now and the Nordic countries, especially Sweden and Finland in the early 90s. For good or bad, there have been blanket bank guarantees. Maybe, this is my thinking, Ireland exaggerated in their decision in October 2008. Then there has been, secondly, the bad bank establishment, rubbish bank as we call it in Finland. The name of the Finnish bank was Arsenal, you have Nama. Then the role of fiscal policy has become very important, and there is this big discussion concerning what to do, what would be the proportion of cuts in the public expenditure, how much would we be in a position to increase taxation. The concerns from the Nordic point of view in this respect are related to not cutting too much in education, in research and development and innovation. And when Angel Gurria, the OECD Secretary General, visited here late 2009, he said that kindly, this was addressed to the Irish, kindly don't cut the branch you are sitting on, referring especially to education and innovation funding. So I hope this will be well settled, preserving these items that your future, our future, will be very much based. There is also an opportunity in crisis, as I already said, and we wouldn't advise by Finland you to follow the Finnish example in the early 90s, because it was a catastrophe in Finland, especially for worse off and marginalized people, and who were those who suffered most. But there is nothing so bad as having also a good side. This crisis, as we have partly heard from Jukka Pekkarinen, speeded up and facilitated necessary structural changes in Finland. It also taught us sounder budgeting and budget discipline. It also affected the Finnish housing loans interest that still remain lowest in Europe, and the condition of the banks, the Finnish banks, is one of the best in Europe. So there is also the other side of the coin, learning and doing something positive. My last point, Chair, you seem to be still be a bit patient towards me. There is a certain, in terms of lessons learned, there is a certain tragedy I want to mention. And I'm quoting Sixten Korkman, who used to be in the same position in the Department of Finance, Ministry of Finance in Finland as Jukka Pekkarinen is now, from 89 to 95. And when this happened in Finland, Sixten recalls that he said that this was a terrible catastrophe. And he said, I believe that no one else will never ever repeat the same stupidities that we made in the late 80s in Finland. But we may have done it. And my conclusion here is that exactly this kind of occasions, bilateral discussions, learning from each other, really listening to each other, and turning also the European Union into a learning organization, which it is not. We are rushing for decisions, sometimes we manage, sometimes we err, but what we don't really do, we don't analyze each other's experiences, lessons learned. We are not a learning organization. Let's go to that direction. Thank you so much.